Razz Reviews. Today I'm going to be reviewing Blade Runner 2049. Before I start, I have two things I want you guys to know. Number one, this review is going to be extremely spoiler-free because the director and the filmmakers have asked people not to spoil the film, and after seeing the film, there is a lot to spoil. So I will not be discussing any plot points or anything about the film so that you can have the experience that I had. The second thing is that this film is a direct sequel to the 1982 Blade Runner directed by Ridley Scott. This film is not a reboot and is very connected to the original film, so if you have not seen that movie, this will be a very confusing experience for you. Also, I highly recommend you check out 3 short films that were released by Warner Brothers that detail events that happened in the timeline between the first film and this one. I've actually put the links to these shorts in the description of this video. And now on to the review. So I've had really big expectations for this film coming up. Blade Runner is one of my favorite films of all time, and Denis Villeneuve is becoming one of my favorite directors working today, especially because I'm such a big fan of his films Sicario, Prisoners, and Arrival last year. I love the short films leading up to this movie. I love the trailers. I felt like at some point I was really setting myself up for a big disappointment. But I'm glad to report that this film did not disappoint me at all. It is an absolutely incredible piece of film. It's hard to judge now, but I can see it becoming a classic in the future and having as much of a cult following as the original Blade Runner had. In terms of plot, all I'm gonna say that this film picks up 30 years after the storyline of the original Blade Runner, and it follows the story of Kay, played by Ryan Gosling, who is a Blade Runner tasked with terminating different replicants or robots that live in this world, and he's trying to discover a certain mystery that he has come across. And that's it. Zip. I have to say, I love this movie. I loved it. Loved it. Interestingly enough, the things that I liked about this movie are very similar to the things that I liked about the original Blade Runner, so you're kind of getting a 2-for-1 deal review. So let's start by talking about the top 3 things that I liked about Blade Runner 2049. Number 3, the mood. This movie excels at establishing a mood for this world and for the story it's trying to tell. From the amazing visuals helmed by one of the greatest cinematographers living today, Roger Deakins, this film looks absolutely stunning. Give it all the Oscars. Give it all the awards. And it's not just how it looks, also what you see is incredible. The production design and the visual effects are amazing. I love the fact that they kind of built upon the analog technology that existed in the original Blade Runner, because it was very 80s, and it made it look like what those technologies would look like 30 years after that film. And I thought that was pretty cool and a really nice touch, and it really made me feel like I am still in that world. This movie's mood is so unique to it, it's like its signature, and it's established with not only the visuals, also the soundtrack is haunting and beautiful. It uses certain elements from the original theme and the original soundtrack, but it also builds upon it and expands it in such a beautiful way. The number 2 thing I liked about Blade Runner 2049 is the themes. Even though this movie is more plot-driven than the original one, still beneath the plotline there's all these philosophical layers and questions and themes that the movie poses. It borrows a lot from the original themes, but it also pushes them forward and pushes the boundaries of these questions. Watching this movie, you can't help but ask, what does it mean to be human? And what defines humanity itself? And it also offers a really interesting commentary on the isolation of the modern world. And it also gives us a bleak look at what it might look like in the future. It's a lot worse. So the film is very isolating and also very haunting. It really stays with you afterwards. Of course, giving you themes alone is not enough. The film provides really interesting, intriguing, multi-layered characters who are pondering and asking these questions themselves. And you care about them and you care what happens to them, and with them you start investigating these ideas. And that's what makes the themes really hit home and really have an impact on you as a viewer. The number 1 thing I liked about Blade Runner 2049 is how it expanded on the original film. It wasn't a sequel for the sake of being a sequel. You feel like the story is coming organically from the world of the original film. Like it was supposed to happen and you just happen to see it now. The movie took the world of Blade Runner and just made it much bigger and much more expansive while remaining loyal to the original film and feeling really beautifully connected to it, and it felt like it was actually even a tribute to the original film. It must be one of the best sequels I've ever seen in my life. Even this incredible movie is not free from flaws, so I'm going to tell you the top 3 things I didn't really like about Blade Runner 2049. Number 3, some pacing issues. Right off the bat, you guys need to know that this movie is very, very long. It clocks at 2 hours and 40 minutes. Now that's pretty long, so take your pee break, get a lot of snacks, you're gonna get hungry, you're gonna get thirsty, because it takes a long time for this film to finish. But it didn't feel too long for me personally. There were certain scenes that I felt like they didn't really belong, but I don't know, I have to watch this film over and over again to really get a grasp and understand why certain things were there. But I can understand for people less patient, it might feel a little too long, or it might feel like it drags in certain parts. The number 2 thing I didn't like was some unanswered questions. Now this is a tricky part because I don't want to talk about the plot, but there are certain things that I wanted to be a little bit more clearer for me, and that's a very personal choice and a very subjective thing to say. And when I left, I felt like, I wish I understood what that meant. Later, I might actually dive further into the film and kind of figure out certain things better. But when I first stepped out of the film, there are certain things that I felt like I wish were explained a little bit better. The number one thing I didn't like about Blade Runner 2049 was the character of Wallace. I'm saying this little worried because I might change my mind. I don't know. But generally, my first impression of him is not a favorable one. I don't know why I felt like he didn't belong in this world. He felt a little bit too odd and too weird and sometimes a little over the top, to be honest. And I couldn't really separate the actor from the performance, which kind of takes me out of the movie personally. I always felt like I'm watching Jared Leto be weird rather than watching an actual character from the world of Blade Runner. And the fact that I couldn't say that about anybody else is what made him stand out for me in a bad way. Like in contrast, the other characters like Ryan Gosling's character, like Joy, I felt like they were part of this world. I completely disassociated the fact that they were actors. And at the same time, I was also not satisfied with the character himself because I felt like I wanted more from him. I needed to know more about this character and see more of him. Look guys, all in all, this is a stunning film and an extremely satisfying sequel for a movie that I've loved for a very long time. And I think it will be satisfying for most Blade Runner fans. And it's one of those films that only time will tell how much it holds up and how much of an impact it will have. But I have a feeling that it's gonna have a big impact on filmmaking and on storytelling because I think it's incredibly powerful. And for that reason, I'm gonna give Blade Runner 2049 a 9.5 out of 10. This movie's so good. Every time I think about it, it's like... So, have you seen the original Blade Runner? Have you seen Blade Runner 2049? What are your thoughts on it? And is there any other cult classic that you'd like to see a satisfying sequel for? Let me know in the comment section, and as always, like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to tell me what you'd like me to review for you next. See ya!